Following the collapse of the Bronze Age, the territories of Asia Minor, once dominated by the Hittite Empire, became fragmented with a number of smaller kingdoms and tribes seizing the opportunity and expanding their realms. In this episode, we will talk about the establishment and the rise of Phrygia during this little-known period, from the transition from mythological and historical period of the Phrygian tribes to their rise and unification into a single kingdom that would emerge from the mist of the Dark Ages. As the Hittite Empire had fallen, its territories were overrun by their numerous enemies, chiefly by the Achaeans from the north, but also the invaders coming from the west. In the western part of Asia Minor, the early Phrygian tribes were already established, furthering their own influence, and were possibly among the constituents of a force that brought down the once mighty Hittites. These early Phrygians possibly appear in the Assyrian records under the name Mushki, who in the decades and centuries following the fall of Hattusa often stood in alliances opposite the great Assyrian Empire. As the Phrygians possessed no writing system at the time, any definite connections are difficult to determine with certainty, leaving us with no names of their kings and rulers throughout this early period. What we do know is that the Phrygians of the Dark Age did not belong to a unified state and were rather divided between their tribal realms, much like their mythical ancestors of the late Bronze Age. To the west, the core Phrygian territories bordered the land of Mycenaean. This border, however, never appeared to have been fixed, as various Phrygian rulers were said to have reigned over areas considered to be a part of Mycenaean, and therefore making any clear distinction difficult to establish in many of the cases. Further west was the coastal Asia Minor, which was from the 11th century BCE in the process of being colonized by the incoming settlers from Greece. Now it is unclear whether the Phrygian elites adopted the cultural traits from the incoming Greek colonists, among whom were no doubt the descendants of the former Mycenaeans, or if they had rather already been influenced by the Mycenaean Greece in the past. But either way, the Phrygians did appear to carry many of the old Mycenaean traits, such as noble and royal titles, a practice that would survive well into the historical times until the very fall of Phrygia. At the top of the Phrygian society was a king, corresponding to the Mycenaean Wanax, although on a much smaller scale, likely accompanied by a council of nobles belonging to the Phrygian aristocracy. Below them were the free people, many of which lived on the countryside as farmers and shepherds, but also inside the Phrygian cities as merchants, blacksmiths, and various other occupations. Just like everywhere else at the time, the bottom of the Phrygian society consisted of slaves, captured during many Phrygian campaigns and clashes against the surrounding tribes, but also local battles between the Phrygian rulers themselves. In the following years, the Phrygians continued to expand eastwards, and by the year 1000 BCE, the city of Ancyra was established as one of the main Phrygian centers. This expansion was attributed to the Phrygian faction ruling from the city of Gordian, which had by this time become the core area of the Phrygian power and influence. It is very likely that this dynasty at Gordian traced their origins to the mythological rulers Gordius and Midas, since these two names would later appear to be rather common among the Phrygian kings. Either way, the Phrygia proper soon became the leading authority among the surrounding tribes, who would eventually, either voluntarily or by the force of arms, all become a part of a single kingdom of Phrygia. By the 10th century BCE, the kingdom of Phrygia rose up as a significant power in Western Asia Minor, with the monumental construction projects taking place at the capital city of Gordian. A large wall was constructed around the Gordian citadel with an extensive gate complex. The main citadel gate was to the east, made 10 meters tall and served as both the increased defense and the projection of the rising Phrygian power. From Gordian, the Phrygian kings ruled over vast territory, much larger than any of their neighbors. One of those neighbors, the Mycenaeans, would also soon be subjugated, enabling Phrygia to become the dominant power in the Western Asia Minor, establishing a direct border with the Aeolian Greeks to the west. The relations with the Greeks, however, would be that of friendship and partnership, as the Aeolian cities were relatively wealthy and powerful themselves, with both sides profiting from trade and cultural affinity that appeared to have been on a steady rise. Starting from the 9th century BCE, numerous royal Timoli burials were constructed at Gordian, further proving the increased wealth and power of the Phrygian rulers. At around 800 BCE, however, a large fire spread over the eastern portion of the Gordian citadel, causing severe damage and near destruction. As there appears to be no outside attack associated with this event, it is widely believed that this had been an accident, especially as it by no means slowed down the rise of the Phrygian power. The citadel was almost immediately rebuilt to a much larger scale, with the city itself expanded to its greatest size. At this time, the Phrygian kingdom reached the apex of its political might, controlling much of the Asia Minor west of the Halys River and likely exerting tribute from many of their eastern neighbors. It was soon after this time that the Greek sources bring us the name of the first historical Phrygian ruler, a king named Gordius, that had ruled in early to mid-8th century BCE. No details are known about the reign of this Gordius, other than his name being mentioned in a passage by Herodotus. However, the construction of a large chamber tomb at the heart of the great tumulus in Gordian is dated to have taken place in the 8th century BCE, likely during the reign of Gordius, originally attributed to his son Midas. The archaeologists discovered an almost intact royal burial dating to about 740 BCE, containing the remains of a large funeral feast, including extensive amounts of vessels and pottery. Together with those remains also were the remains of a wooden coffin and the skeleton of a buried ruler, about 1.6 meters tall, estimated to have died at about 60 years of age. Gordius would be succeeded by his son Midas, whose reign is much better attested in the ancient sources, which we will surely cover in the next episode of the series on ancient Phrygia. Please consider subscribing and sharing the video, as this is a one-person production and it greatly helps the visibility of the channel. Special thanks to History with Sai, Nico, Panayotis Yiannopoulos, Fred Lecky, and Estate Care for their continuous support. If you wish to become a Patreon member, please click the link in the video description. This was WanaxTV, and we'll see you again soon.